Welcome back, Sports Talker Nation. Once again, it's your host, the G-Man, as we continue our 2015 team-by-team review of the NFL season. Today, we're going to talk about my beloved Green Bay Packers. Now, it's funny that I mention them that way because I'm actually not a Packers fan, but they are an interesting study to show just how important a quarterback is. There are a lot of things I think are wrong with that team. I think that their offensive line is in a constant state of shambles. Their defense actually got some decent play from their line, but they're willing to give up the big play, and they don't play the run very well. Their wide receivers, after the tragic injury to Nelson early in the year, Randall Cobb didn't step as you would expect he would, and they were just awful. And their coach, I actually think, is an impediment to their performance. I have never understood what people love about Mike McCarthy so much. And last but not least, which I'll get into the what went wrong real deeply, is Eddie Lacy. What he needs to do is put down the biscuits. My brother likes to say he's 2 biscuits shy of 300 pounds. I think Eddie Lacy is only 1 biscuit shy of 300 pounds. He has so much talent and so little self-control. He really needs to push away from the dinner table and see what he can become. But despite all that, the Packers were in the playoffs, and it was all on the arms and the back of Aaron Rodgers. A-Rod is phenomenal. Everything you would have thought he was, he is. He's also a much better person than Brett Favre. I couldn't stand the Packers for years because I am a known Brett Favre hater. I think he's a narcissistic douchebag who was all about himself and didn't actually care about the team. Just wanted the highlights, and he proved it as he bounced from team to team to team, trying to beat the Packers at the end. But I digress. So what went right? Well, they made the playoffs. They did find a semblance of balance in their offense, despite their offensive shortfalls as far as the play calling. They did find some decent offensive linemen, which is going to help them. They got to use some younger wide receivers, which hopefully develop. If not, they certainly uncovered the need for them. They may have found themselves a tight end in Richard Rodgers. On defense, I'm also a noted Clay Matthews hater. Again, I think he's a camera whore, but I think he played incredibly well. I think he is a natural outside linebacker who rushes the passer, but for the betterment of the team, he took over at the inside linebacker spot and kind of shifted around, did a really good job. Julius Peppers found the fountain of youth. He fades sometimes because he does have advanced age, but he played really well for the most part. They do need some defensive line interior help. The big, fat guys, the older you get, the harder it is to maintain any physical fitness, and they suffered through some of that. Their defensive backfield had a lot of injuries. They are noted to have very good corners. I like the style they play, so they actually performed well when they were on the field. What didn't go right? I'm going to start with Eddie Lacy. Eddie, look 2 years ago to how successful you were when you came out of college and you were hungry, metaphorically, not physically, because you weren't hungry, because you actually didn't eat all the time. Now he eats all the time. He can say all he wants that it's not conditioning and that I had a rib injury or a foot injury. When your coach comes out at the end of the year and says, Eddie Lacy needs to lose 20 pounds, in fact, Eddie Lacy needs to lose 40 pounds because I think Eddie Lacy is 280 pounds. He had a breakaway run late in the season and into the playoffs where he had a 55-yard run and he was dying for someone to tackle him. Any other part back makes it to the end zone and at least falls down in the end zone. He couldn't wait for somebody to tackle him because he was totally out of breath. Too much talent to let yourself eat your way out of the league, Eddie. Get it together. Big fan, get it together. What else didn't go right? Mike McCarthy gave over the play calling and took over the play calling, all the while tries to slow the clock down with the best quarterback in football. And I don't mean the best of all time, but I mean the best current day. Numbers aside, Cam Newton had a phenomenal year. Aaron Rodgers, if you asked me to start a team with a quarterback, it would be Aaron Rodgers. Why would you slow it down when your defense isn't exactly the 85 Bears? Do the right thing. Let your team play a little up-tempo. I know coaches like to control everything. Let your team do what it should do. Offensively, wide receivers, Randall Cobb really, really came up small. I think he's a much more talented guy than that, but he came up terribly small. Jordy Nelson got hurt, and I guess it really threw their entire offense into a loop because they're used to him catching that back shoulder and being the deep threat and opening up the center of the field for the tight end and for Cobb. But it just didn't happen. James Jones actually played pretty well for spurts. Earlier in the year, he had a real connection with A-Rod, but by the end of the year, he was showing the fact that he's just James Jones after all. Defensively, the defensive backfield, as I mentioned, had some injuries. Linebackers were okay, not great, and the front four got some pass rush, needs to improve, and were bad against the run. So They have their challenges, but again, at the end of the day, they draft well. They'll get people back from injuries, and they still have that Aaron Rodgers guy. So moving forward, I actually think the future's bright for them. As long as they have Rodgers, they're always going to be in the hunt. They need some speed rushers on the outside, or at the very least, a strong tackling machine. Everyone can always use some offensive line. I also think they could use a defensive tackle. Drafting where they do, down in that 27 spot, you're probably in position to take the best player available. Hopefully for them, it's one of those need positions, but they should be smart about it. I see them as the year comes up. They'll be 10-6, 11-5. I think they'll either be right in the division hunt. They might even be 12-4. They'll win the division. I think they're in the playoffs with a little defensive help and a little bit of latitude from the coach. I think the Packers will be back. And for me, that's your 2015 Green Bay Packers season review. I'm your host, the G-Man, and I am out.